All right, welcome everybody to feedback session number 9. Hopefully, with any luck, our last feedback session, but we're not making any promises. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Nancy Vandell, chair of our NCAC Bylaws Committee, and all of our Bylaws Committee members are here. I'd also like to introduce Commissioner Doug Olson, who's vice chair of the Tillamook County Board of Commissioners. Welcome, Commissioner Olson. Thank you there. There you are, waving. And Mark Everett, who's our chair of the NCAC. Welcome, Mark. And our illustrious group of people that attend and comment and have made such a great improvement over our bylaws. So committee members, could you please introduce yourselves?
Michael Beachley, member of the subcommittee.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Miller, and I'm on the Bylaws subcommittee as well.
Wyatt Angelo.
Great.
Susan Schomburg, Bylaws Committee, Subcommittee.
Tom Sype, editor.
Okay, thank you. And could the NCAC members please also introduce yourselves?
Barb Triplett.
Tom Perhodich. There I am.
Hi.
Hello, subcommittee members and Commissioner Olson and friends.
I hope you're feeling better, Tom.
I am feeling better. Thank you very much.
Good.
And Mark. Mark's here too.
And Roger and
Well,
Wickland.
I said friends.
Uh-huh.
I include Roger in that category.
And Barbara Triplett and Bill Bush are here. Sarah Apsher is going to be joining us shortly. She texted that she's on her way home. So I'm just going to share the agenda very quickly here to go over tonight's plan. If I can find it. I had tried to close everything. Okay, I think this looks good. Can everybody see the agenda? Let me make it a little bigger here. So we're doing a little bit something different tonight. If you had downloaded things earlier today, you may find that we have some updated versions. We have been working all day on various updates. But today, what we're planning to do is go over mainly focusing on the changes we've done to the bylaws over the last many months and summarize those changes and particularly to let community members know of how things resulted out of their input to the feedback sessions and through the bylaws committee members or meetings and emails, etc. And then discuss those changes. And if necessary, we'll go back to the actual bylaws draft document that's all together on one PowerPoint now. And then following that, the subcommittee members have been providing some input and other people to the bylaws draft. And we invite all of you to remain, but we need to go ahead and talk about some of the input that we've received on the draft as well. So that following tonight, Tom Sype is planning to go in and convert the PowerPoint into a Word document that we will be discussing at our Bylaws Committee meeting on Friday. What comes out of our Bylaws Committee meeting on Friday will be updated and sent to the membership likely on Saturday, April 6th, so that people will have a week to look at it before we present the bylaws proposal and mainly the changes, again, like the list that you'll see tonight at the general membership meeting on April 13th. We've been generously given 45 minutes to go through the bylaws changes and to let people know what we're looking at. They'll have a draft document and be able to provide their input. Following that meeting, we have another bylaws committee subcommittee meeting on April 19th, and we will do any final tweaks. I should not use the word final. We will do any updates to that document and then send that off to Tillamook County for approval. So along the way, Sarah Apsher has been absolutely terrific in working with the county council and the county commissioners, letting them know what we have been doing all the way along. But this will be a more formal submission on April 19th, April 20th, And we have been told to expect that we can get the county response back by our bylaws subcommittee on May 3rd. And hopefully a lot of the key areas have already been okayed by council and the commissioners. And then we will be having following that, then May 3rd committee meeting will send out an updated draft if there are any changes out to the membership again in preparation for Saturday, May 11th. And on Saturday, May 11th, we are having a special general meeting. And that will be just to adopt the bylaws revision, which is a complete revision of the bylaws. And we'll be doing parliamentary procedures. Thanks to Michael Beachley, we'll be presenting parliamentary procedures at 9:40 on how to be able to make amendments. And then at 10 o'clock, we'll actually be starting the special meeting and getting hopefully approval. So that's kind of the schedule for coming up. So as you can see, there are going to still be a number of opportunities for people to provide comment as we do these updates, but hopefully there'll be fewer and fewer needed. So are there any comments on the agenda? Let me just go through the rules for discussion again. We've been fairly ad hoc about this because it's been a small group, but it's easiest for us, particularly when we're sharing something, to put a comment in the chat saying you want to speak or put the comment in itself. And Susan, can I ask you to monitor the chat and let us know what's going on, because we
Sure,
can't
no
always see
problem.
it. We can't usually see your hand necessarily when we're sharing the screen. So I think that's about it. Stop sharing that. Any comments on the agenda? Okay, and welcome Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development for Tillamook County. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to go ahead and share the document. That's that I hope I still have up. Ready? You would think I would have had that. One moment.
Generally, it's easier if you share your screen rather than an individual document. That way you can just flip it in and out.
Okay, thank you, Tom. It would be helpful if I'd actually pulled up the document, but yeah, okay. So let me share the screen now. So what we're going to be doing here is I'm going to share the screen with the summary document, which you can see in the meeting folder. Does everybody know how to get to the meeting folder and look at that? And then we're going to be flipping back and forth between Tom and me if you want to see the actual wording in the bylaws. So, so what we're doing is just summarizing the major changes. And let me just preface that by saying that we have been going by the document that was generally approved at the October 14th general meeting that had been changed to the Robert's Rules of Order format. And it had editorial revisions done mainly by Tom with input from the committee. So that's what we're starting with. We're not starting with the actual complete approved bylaws that's in a PDF format. So yeah, we do go back and forth to both, but that's kind of our reference document throughout this. So there are a whole bunch of areas where wholesale movement of text has gone from one area to another, one article to another one. So there's a lot of changes between this and the actual document that you would see on the website currently. So with that said, we don't have anything that are major changes in Articles 1 and 2. Article 1 is name of the organization. Article 2 is the object of the organization. There's a little wordsmithing in the object, but nothing major. So Article 3, everybody's favorite article. We have some changes here. One change is to, and at the end of each article here, we'll stop for questions, but please feel free to put something in the chat. Don't wait for us to ask you. So on Article three members. We have the NCAC area, and what we did was clarify the boundary area for membership to encompass the Nescoin watershed within Tillamook County. Current members remain within the boundary, so we're not excluding anybody that's a current member, and the reference map is in Article 10, which we'll get to. I want to thank Bill Bush for giving Tom and Wyatt a lot of good input on the area. Article 3, members, defines the member types for resident, property owner, and business owner. And the formal definitions are in Article 10 as well. The definition, this is fairly new from our last feedback session. It limits members per property up to 4 authorized persons per property for each category type, with the proviso that any individual who qualifies for membership shall have only 1 vote. So this is new and it's important. So I'd like to see, I think I see something is in the chat. Is that right?
Yes,
Susan?
Barbara Trippett would like to speak.
Okay, Barbara, would you like to comment?
Yes, with Article 3, Section 1, the NCAC area, the sentence that reads, current members remain within the boundary. Does this mean I can't go to Lincoln City to do my grocery shopping? I
That's a
think
very
that
good point.
there are some changes I suggest, and I will admit to being an editor for the last 20 years. Current members, parentheses, residents, property owners, and business owners have interests within the property.
So let's actually bring that slide up. Tom, I'm going to stop. Well, let me just go ahead and go to that presentation. You said I could just do this, right? I could just flip over and
While
share
she's
somewhere
doing
else
that,
on the
did she
computer.
say within the property, or did she mean within the NCAC area?
Within the boundary.
So we have to go to the actual document, Barbara, because those words were just to talk about what the change was. It wasn't to actually, it's not the actual document wording. We're just trying to summarize what we did as a change, not with the actual wording.
Okay.
So thank you, Tom.
So you'll note some green in there. That's represents some editorial changes that we were making and have not yet discussed in the committee. So it's essentially says the same thing.
Thank you.
Okay.
That good?
So by that comment that I had in the document, thank you. Yes, Tom. So that document, the comment I had in the document was more, if you could stop sharing, then we'll go ahead.
I'm trying to stop. I can't stop.
Thank you. It was just to let people know, because there had been a concern early on that we might be restricting, keeping people out. And we wanted to make it just very clear that that's not what we were doing. Okay, so I hopefully that'll clarify what this document is just showing what we've changed.
This is a narrative, not literal.
Correct. So, but I know this part about the up to 4 authorized persons per property is a change, and that came from Sarah Apsher and the County Council. So I'm just going to ask Sarah if she would address that.
Hi, Nancy. Good evening.
Hi.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Okay. It's nice to see everyone. At the last committee meeting, what I had shared in my efforts to continue to work with County Council to find a solution to the concerns about voting while continuing to meet the expectation of inclusivity and equity. I started looking at ownership arrangements of properties in the community. This was a very high level review. I did not pull every single tax account and look. Just want to make that clear. But I understood the concerns about fractional ownership, about limited liability corporations, and other ownership arrangements where you had, and Michael talked about this a lot, where there were properties with multiple owners, trying to figure out how to find a way to meet and address the community concerns, but also, again, stay within the realm of the spirit of the CAC as an advisory body to the county, specifically for goal one land use. And again, that inclusivity and equity. What I found was that there were several arrangements of properties where you had properties in a trust, where maybe the trustees were siblings, they're both married, or families that share ownership of property through some sort of family arrangement. And what I found was there were several properties that fit a number of 4 or less. And that's where for joint ownership of a property, if you had siblings that were both married or children, et cetera, that had that ownership interest, it was 4 appeared to be a large enough number to meet the inclusion and equity component, but it wasn't up to 12 or 25 as what was discussed as really being concerns by the community. Vetted that through county council, and he reluctantly agreed to that and said he would take a look at that in the bylaws under 2 conditions. The first one was also that it is understood that voting is by an honor system, and that 2, pertaining to roll call votes, which I know Nancy and Tom and Michael and others will get into later, that a roll call vote needed to be taken at that moment in a meeting. So just so it's understood, you know, the voting system, it is an honor system, but this is a way that we could help better address the concerns of the community with multiple ownership.
Thank you, Sarah. And so if I think all of you are familiar with that, as we've done these feedback sessions, that the strong consensus was that we should have voting that had some limits and membership that had some limits per property. And it kind of came down as 2. Everybody agreed that they should be equal limits or not. It was a strong consensus. And then that it should be 2 votes per property. We didn't ask about beyond 2. And so this is a nice compromise. I think that the committee agreed that this was a nice compromise that Sarah was able to negotiate for us. So thank you, Sarah. It keeps the concern out about the, you know, the extreme levels that could potentially come in, and protects us from that. So we really appreciate all your efforts on that. Just to clarify, we have added, and you'll see later, we have added the part about that we will be doing honor system, that we're not going to be, we just don't have the capacity to do any kind of policing even if we wanted to. So and Wyatt, would you like to speak to Wyatt? Has as a federal prosecutor has had some experience with honor system kinds of things, and his experience has been very reassuring to us.
Yeah, most people comply with the law because they want to, or because the circumstances of prosecution or embarrassment are more than they want to take on. So it seemed to us that an honor system is really what we were dealing with anyway. So it seemed to us that it was appropriate to put it in there.
Thank you. And then to clarify on the roll call voting, tell me if I'm wrong, Sarah. With the roll call voting, we have in there that someone can make a motion to have a roll call vote within the meeting at the time of the roll call vote, or at the time of a vote, either before the vote or after the vote has been made, but right there in that meeting. And it's a motion to have one that would then be voted on by the membership, correct?
That is correct.
But to answer one of the gentleman's questions, Nancy, votes don't have to be roll call votes. They
Correct.
can
Thank
be
you.
if they're required, but otherwise they're just.
I see Jeff had a question in the chat. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Bill. That's correct. It's an optional thing. So we'll go, actually, when we get to that point, we'll go ahead and look at the document and what we've written there.
Nancy,
again-
Tom Prohodich would like to speak.
Okay, Tom?
I have difficulty unmuting. Surprisingly, this isn't going to be a comment about voting, except to say I'm not as sure I agree with the 4, but I understand the rationale. I prefer 2. I'll just respectfully disagree, but I'm not a decision maker, so that's just my opinion. But I have another concern, which is I pulled off, I guess, an earlier revision earlier today to read the whole thing. And you've only shown what it looks like 81 pages. Um, and you've only
I
shown
think we're up to 83 now.
you've only shown one slide, and it's different from it's the members NCAC area, and it's been changed. And
Oh, yes.
Okay.
it seems to me that you really need to on the important things, show us where you are now.
Yes, and this is something that's just come up during today, and it's one of the things we were going to be discussing at the end on whether we want to even change the wording, but you're absolutely right, Tom. We should have explained that a little bit closer. So, Tom Sipe, can you share the document on that page?
Yeah, this is a tentative change.
Okay.
And the committee needs to discuss that. We just have not had the time, and the open meeting laws prevented us from having a special meeting to discuss this. So that's where we're at. We had it come up in the last 2 days. We had a number of suggestions, and we just can't act on them without having a meeting. But this is tentatively what we believe will happen, or at least under discussion. I don't
So
believe it
let's-
changes the actual meaning.
Can you share the document, Tom?
I thought I did.
I guess I'm more concerned as to whether or not that's happened in a lot of places, because I mean,
Oh, I did. Sorry.
I think those of us that pulled it off to look at it probably pulled off an earlier version.
I don't know which version this happened in. Nancy, you did that one. I think at R3.
Yeah, I think it was our.
I can run through quickly to show you the magnitude, and then would that give you at least some reassurance that we're not trying to represent something different.
But this is a particularly important slide.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it on this one for now, but this was a particularly important one that came in. Bill Miller suggested doing the revised wording to be able to call the NCAC area kind of an official term. And
we
Bill,
used
do you
it
want to
to-
speak to what you
Well,
suggest?
we used the term throughout. Earlier, it had been, we said what the membership area was, but so this is really not a change, Tom. It's just to have a functional definition that we can use for what NCAC area means.
Yeah, I don't particularly have I mean, that language seems fine to me.
Yeah, but I think your concern that you're addressing, I don't think there have been more than maybe a few changes
Okay.
like this since the version you looked at. And
Well, if
Tom can probably provide you with exactly what those changes have been.
if you're going to, I think it might be still more helpful to look at these slides together, because rather than look at the other format or the other document in another format, so we could see what we're talking about.
Well,
we
reason,
probably
Tom, is that we're trying to highlight the changes that we think you'll find significant, rather than all the nitty things. And with each, if we go through each slide, we'll be.
You don't have to go through each slide. I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying where you think there are significant issues or there have been changes made. If you could, for example, in members, we all know that's been a hot topic. If we can just look at those, I mean, I don't think we need to look at, I mean, that takes you to what, slide 10? I mean,
we can certainly do that.
The first nine slides, no one has any problem with the name of the organization and the objects. So, and by the way, I mean, I went through it, and I think it's excellent. I mean, I only had noticed maybe 3 minor things, but it depends, depends on what the particular language is and if it's changed.
Okay.
Nancy, there's a comment in the chat from Barbara Triplett. The logistics for conducting a roll call vote have been awkward during past NCAC Zoom meetings. Are there some new ways to conduct roll call votes?
At this point, that would be something in the policies and procedures, Barbara. We are just mainly, the roll call votes were in the current bylaws as something that can be done. And we have also put them in our bylaws as well, the current version. So we've made them a little more explicit on how to do them. But in terms of, yeah, so let me also clarify that basically the roll call votes are not mandatory. They're just if they're requested by a member, the member makes a recommendation, a motion to have a roll call vote at a meeting at the time of the vote. And at that point, then it becomes like a motion. The chair will ask if there's any, for a second, if there's any discussion, and have a vote on whether to have a roll call vote. So if the membership wants to have a roll call vote, then there is a roll call vote done. It's going to be hard, right? I think people know that that's going to be very tough. But we are going to have to figure out how to do it. I don't know that. I know that when you've had votes in last year, there were a couple of times when a poll couldn't be done and a roll call vote was basically done. And it's difficult with Zoom because people go, the images go around. So it's something that we or, the bylaws committee next year or at some point this year are going to have to figure out, or the officers are going to have to figure out how to accomplish it. But it is something that is required or is allowed in Robert's Rules of Order, and the county council is requiring that we have this as an option.
Jeff has a comment in the chat. The committee has committed to providing a complete quote cooked end quote draft on Saturday. And then another chat from Barbara Triplett. There's a world of difference between an in-person meeting and a Zoom meeting for conducting roll call votes.
You are correct, Barbara. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and go through the member slides, because we're done with that part of the bylaws summary of proposed revisions. So Tom, do you want to take us through?
Am I still sharing? Yes. We had one of our members question whether or not who identify as a member of Nesco community. I like the phrase. Somebody else didn't. I don't think that's a substantive change, but that's something we need to discuss. I think that this particular phrase is misplaced because it should be in voting, not in the member definition. And it doesn't matter if somebody declares themselves to be a member and doesn't vote. It only matters for voting.
So at this point, we have it
be.
listed in yellow in both sections, and
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about this at the end of this meeting on where it really belongs, but we have it captured.
Yeah. I'm flavoring this with my own opinion. Sorry.
That's okay.
And this is a clear cut, no change and no change. Okay, those are the possible changes to the members area.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on Article 3 members at this point? Because we'll get into some of the other areas here shortly, but.
Nancy, would you like me to hold off on the roll call vote chat questions until voting?
Why don't we wait until we get to voting?
Okay.
That's Article 5.
Come in.
Thank you. So does anyone else have any? Okay, so I'm going to share the document here for going into Article 4. Officers. So the document, and we could go to the document following this too, but just we thought it would be helpful because when you're looking at the two parts of the draft showing the current wording and the proposed wording, it's hard to tell sometimes what the changes are. So that's why we're listing these separately and going through them quickly. So Article 4 lists the elected officers, and we're changing chair to chairperson for Robert's rules and Bill. Creates the immediate past chairperson position, which Barbara Triplett had proposed, and we like that. Who may serve as an ex officio officer for the first year of the chairperson's term to provide continuity and support. And we're creating a parliamentarian position as an appointed officer. The chairperson duties, we remove the authority to appoint subcommittee members. Instead, that goes to the membership, and with the current executive board's support on this. And Mark, please speak up if you'd like. And then changes the planning of general meeting agendas from the chairperson to coordinate, the chairperson coordinating with the executive board. And that's the only difference on chairperson duties. For the vice chair, we've added serving as the chair for any reason that the chairperson needs to vacate the chair, and changes from assisting the chairperson as needed to assisting other officers. So the current bylaws talk about the chairperson acting in the absence of the chair, of the vice chair, acting in the absence of the chairperson. And we kind of expanded that a little bit in case the chairperson, say, the person running the meeting needs to be fairly neutral on something. If the chairperson wants to take an active role advocating for something, then they can hand the gavel, the virtual gavel, over to the vice chairperson to run the meeting during that part of the meeting, as an example. The secretary, we reorganized and reduced the redundancies of the secretary duties. We added that the secretary holds ultimate responsibility for NCAC communications, which will delegate communications tasks to a newly formed communication task force as described in Article 7 under subcommittees and task forces. And Jeff had a comment on under secretary that he would like us to change email roster to email list. So we will note that. I don't see a problem with that. Do
I
you,
thought
Tom?
we got rid of roster.
We haven't, I think it was registration was the word we got rid of.
Oh,
So,
okay. Fair enough.
And then treasurer, we changed preparing to coordinate with other officers, the preparation of the budget. So instead of, and it's not like we've got a lot, but with an executive board, we can coordinate. The treasurer has the primary responsibility for the budget, but coordination with the other board members. Clarified in the preparation and presentation of financial reports. We removed the requirement for 2 officers to sign all checks because that's currently not being done. It's not feasible. And the budget's quite limited. So we added an optional annual audit. So Jeff had a comment that he emailed, coordinate with other officers for approval by members at the annual June. He wanted June instead of annual meeting, but Jeff, in another section under meetings, we have that June is, the annual meeting is in June. And schedule, you wanted regular instead of scheduled for written treasurer's report under the bylaws. And I guess that would be correct, because if it's I guess what you're saying is that, correct me if I'm wrong, that if it's an urgent meeting or an emergency meeting, they shouldn't have to present a treasurer's report. Is that correct, Jeff? I don't know if you can talk to us or not. Jeff is traveling. You there, Jeff?
In the chat, he said yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Okay, that was under general. I just want to make sure I know where that is so I can mark it.
It was under treasurer's duties.
Okay.
Excuse me. Yes, it was under treasurer's duties.
Okay.
Section 2D. Thank you, Tom. Immediate past chairperson, we define the duties of the new chairperson as advise the chairperson and other officers as requested and assist with transition to the new board. And then parliamentarian, we define the duties of that new position, which are to attend the NCAC general and executive board meetings and give advice in parliamentary procedure when requested. And we define the rights and privileges and when it's appropriate for the parliamentarian to step aside, which is, again, kind of like the chairperson. If they need to take an active role in advocating for something, it would be appropriate for them to not be acting as parliamentarian at that time. If they're attending an executive board meeting, then our intent would be that they would not vote at the executive board meeting, but that's another addition recently. So you need to talk with our committee members on that particular area. So Michael, we'll talk with you about that after the fact, but they will have voting rights. Parliamentarians will have voting rights when at a regular membership meeting. Nominations and elections changes the election of officers to the April membership meeting from currently the June meeting. This allows the new board to plan for the upcoming year. There would be two boards operating simultaneously, the current board and then the board-elect, essentially, where they can do planning in terms of preparing for new committee activities and the planning for the budget, et cetera, to be approved in June. There's no change in the term dates. The people that are elected in April take over their positions July 1, and continuing officers continue as well. So it's not a big deal. So this year, we're going to have to put some kind of a notation. I understand from Robert's rules we can do this for the transition, because obviously if the bylaws are approved in May, we can't have them elected in April before they're approved. And so they will be elected in June this year. And then it would change next year. Changes the communication of slate by the nominations committee at least 7 days before an election to communication of a list of candidates by the outreach task force at least 14 days before the election meeting. So, so that's a difference. And then the election adds that a voice vote may be held if only one candidate for an office. And I'd like to stop sharing this and go into the presentation, Tom, because I know this has been quite a point of contention that we'd like to discuss with all of you.
Where do you want to go?
I'd like to go, to Article 4, nominations and elections.
Oh, I guessed right,
Yes.
or mostly right.
Yes. So let me just how I worded this.
Well,
Should
Nancy's
that be
looking that up.
Yeah.
Chairperson in the red there.
Yeah. So
Right.
first I should
Yeah.
say somehow we dropped that paragraph. So we're not quite sure who's at fault, but I suspect the editor.
Anyway, it's back in, and we clarified the meeting when the nominations would be opened by the chair at the February meeting instead of the April meeting, and then the election would be in April. So there's been actually, this is officers. This isn't where Jeff had the concern, I don't think.
In that paragraph, though, Tom, chair should be chairperson in the red paragraph.
Yeah, we missed that one, didn't we, Bill?
That's because it was re-imported and after we did the mass change.
So Jeff is saying if there's more than one candidate, then a ballot or electronic poll vote should be taken. Shouldn't a roll call vote be allowed during officer elections as specified in Article 5, Section 8 voting? It should be argued that the voting section makes this clear, but I think it would be less ambiguous to make this clear here. And then under, however, they may begin planning for that next year immediately as an executive board elect, including budget planning and committee preparations. Are these meetings subject to OPML? The answer is probably yes. If so, we should point that out explicitly. P&P should describe how outgoing and incoming executive boards coexist. But I think there is value in calling out OPML requirements in the bylaws. So yeah, we say that OPML has to be followed for any kind of a meeting other than task force, but we can take a look if you feel like that needs to be more explicit at doing that. But we have that in a number of places. So It's probably better to have it in too many places than too few. But we'll take a
Not
look
all
at
of us
that.
agree with that statement.
Okay, so we'll take a look. But yes, a roll call vote would certainly be allowed in an election.
So it's allowed generally. So,
Is right. That's why we have it under voting.
yeah, it's a voting thing.
So, we'll take a look at that comment though. Okay, thank you, Tom. I guess it's actually Article 7 before we have to get to what
Since
Jeff's
you
other
just
concern
mentioned the
was.
roll call vote, Bill Bush had a question in the chat. How do you determine the outcome of the roll call vote on the motion to vote?
That's right. Sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
Majority vote. It's Robert's rules. We've just lifted Robert's rules on that.
Yep.
Or the procedure for a roll call, asking for a roll call vote.
So either people want to do it or they don't.
Yeah, but if you're calling a roll call because you can't determine the number of votes, how do you determine the number of votes on the motion for a roll call?
So the roll call vote isn't typically intended to be if you can't do a poll. A roll call vote is typically intended to be if a member wants to know who is voting how.
Yeah, if we have a technological failure, we may have to resort to a roll call vote, but that's just because
Then we don't do a vote. We don't have to do a motion to approve a roll call vote at that point. So in the bylaws, we actually define what a roll call vote is. And I think we've kind of gotten off a little bit because of the change on membership, but a roll call vote is typically when a member wants to find out how people are voting. And so what we understand from Sarah is that the county council had agreed to go ahead and let us have limits and to be able to, but only if we provide for a way that people can find out how people are voting. So, Michael, would you like to speak to this?
I was hoping not to, but let me try. I can think of two reasons why we might have a roll call vote. The obvious one is if there is not enough credibility in the machinery of voting that we already have. If that's under question for any reason, then a roll call vote is appropriate. It is the right of any member to call for a roll call vote. And if so, it's not a matter of voting. It's a matter of it's going to be done. The second one, the second reason is to find out who voted for whom. And that creates a little bit of a problem for us because there's a lot of people who simply don't want the publicity of letting everybody in the world know how they voted on something. Nevertheless, it is the right of the membership to have a roll call vote. So that rises in the event of something that is particularly contentious. And everybody would like to know just how do we come down. A third and maybe a second B is that somebody is interested in knowing the differential between residents and non-residents or some other differential category on how many votes were cast for this particular group and how many votes were cast for that particular group. My personal feeling about that is we got a problem if we're in that sort of contentious arena, and it would be much better in my mind if we had some discussion elsewhere and under other circumstances about that particular issue rather than a full-blown wide open assembly of roll call vote just to find out who we are and who they are kind of a situation. Nevertheless, we have to work out the procedures, the actual mechanics in how we conduct a roll call vote. That has yet to be determined.
And that'll be in the policies and procedures that we do in the future.
That's on slide number 49, by the way.
Yeah, it is. So, but for now, we will be getting to roll call votes. But in terms of Article 4, I'm going to go ahead and reshare. So we are adding that a voice vote may be held if there's only one candidate for office, which was not in there in the past. We've added a section on removal from office that is recommended by Robert's Rules of Order that basically, hopefully that will never happen. But if there is a necessity of removing an officer from office, then there's a procedure to follow. Article 5 meeting. Oh, first of all, so are there any overall questions on officers? Shall we go through the presentation briefly so that now that you've seen what the changes are?
Tom Prohodich has a question.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, Nancy, my question is, since I'm looking at, I guess it goes back to my earlier point. Can you tell us, I guess you have a revision 3 and that you've
We
made.
have a revision 5.
And I'm working on 6.
Okay, I was looking at 2, which is dated, I think, to March the 29th.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's a world of change, yeah.
Well, can you show us, breeze through these where there have been changes made?
Yeah.
So we can at least see that.
You bet.
And I'm not even,
Okay, so I don't know the change. I think all the changes between 2 and 3, and then 4, 5, and 6. I think we've documented them all. Have not done any corrections, any deletions of highlights.
Was that this first slide? I don't think that was the first slide of officer.
Okay,
Yeah,
there's
okay,
officers.
Thank you.
We're going to discuss mission versus objectives. Objectives actually fits better with Robert's Rules nomenclature, but I'm uncomfortable with it, so we'll figure it out. There's no change from that version. Roster, we just got highlighted. That is a nasty word, and we'll figure out another word for it.
Needs to be list, apparently, according to Jeff, so.
Okay,
When it's in green,
words-
it just means that we've had a suggestion to make that change, but we haven't discussed with the committee yet, so, yeah.
Green or highlight basically means those are potential changes. Is that what was meant by the treasurer? I wasn't quite sure. I was gonna get.
So
back.
did you just highlight? Because yes, because I don't think we need to change that, but Jeff was suggesting making it the June meeting.
Oh, okay. I think we're okay with that, because we don't want to have it in too many places, because if we
already
have
have
something
it.
in a lot of places, we'll
Yeah,
miss one.
We have it in Article 5, so yeah.
Okay. So, and this is something we thought about that we didn't, and we need to discuss. And we definitely haven't discussed it with Michael. So
Actually, my position on that is fits perfectly with what's in yellow there. As a parliamentarian, I'm committed to being neutral, and I will give all the advice you can that I have, but I don't need to be voting.
I thought that was the case, but I
Yeah,
just want to say, yeah, I'm blindsiding you with this.
But that's just for the executive board meetings, Michael,
Yeah.
not for the
That's
general
right.
meetings.
Yes. And by the way, in a general meeting, the parliamentarian may vote only if the parliamentarian is a member.
Right.
Okay. We already owned up to that deficit, and that it got dropped accidentally, and we have the updated dates. And that's it. Those are the pending discussions.
Okay, so are there any questions on Article 4?
Nancy, in the chat, Hillary has a quick question / comment.
Oh, hi, Hillary. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. I joined a little bit late. I was just wondering, first of all, you guys are doing great. This all looks really good. I was just going to say quickly, I do agree with the explicit calling out of the Oregon meeting law thing, having that in there plenty of times. I think that's a good reminder. My question was, I think I saw something on that chart about the chair. It was removing the ability to appoint subcommittee members. was that a new change or what is that?
Mhm.
Like, what's
That's
the
correct.
goal? And, okay, so
So-
like, what's the goal for that?
So what we were, with the officers this year have been trying to be very transparent with the membership and give the membership authority to vote on and elect people. And so the officers agreed that instead of having the chair appoint subcommittee members, that they will be elected. And so they'll be part of, you know, the vetting and that kind of thing, but that they'll be
See,
elected. So
these are,
under Article 7 would cover that election under
Yeah.
Okay.
subcommittees.
so
I just,
what's,
my feedback on that is just, I think that one of the most well-balanced committees that I've seen on the NCAC was the STR subcommittee. And that was a slate that was put together and then the membership voted on the slate. And I like that because it's balanced. And I think that gives credibility to the NCAC, where if you have just like the kind of popularity contest, then it's just kind of like the same crew of people doing things, and people who are really qualified might get not voted to be on a committee to participate.
we have
Okay.
discussed that. And the problem with that is that we also allow nominations from the floor. And how does that affect the slate? You no longer have a slate at that point. So we kind of got in a conundrum about that. So we stepped back and said, well, maybe it is individuals that have to be voted on. And yes, it's a popularity contest, as are all elections. The slate is, given the fact that we can have nominations from the floor, it's just not workable.
Yeah,
So
well,
this
maybe
is
there's
something
a
though.
workaround to change that so that maybe there's not the nominations from the floor, or then maybe the slate gets voted on later. I don't know, because I think it hurts the credibility and the as far as being fair and balanced. Because
So,
it just motivates people to not participate so much.
yeah, I appreciate that, Hillary. We're going to be talking about this when we get to Article 7 with subcommittees. And it's actually something Jeff has had quite a bit of input on as well. And so I do want to open this up for feedback from the group, because I think you raise a good point, and we've kind of gone back and forth. And so I would like to discuss that when we get to Article 7. Is it okay if we wait till then?
Yep, absolutely.
Because it's also mentioned here too,
Okay.
but it could be discussed in Article 6, you know, the executive board, because that could be another area where the executive board could put together a slate. So let's yeah, it's something we really need to hash out.
Nancy,
Great.
there are two
Yeah.
other comments in the chat by Jeff. I'll read them. I didn't see annual meeting in Article 5, and I just looked at it this afternoon. His other comment in the chat is you don't have to allow nominations from floor for committees.
That's true if they're not elected. That's true. If they're appointed by the chair, which the current bylaws are conflicting. In some places, they say the chair can appoint subcommittee members, and in other places, they say subject to the ratification by the membership. So it varies. But in terms of the nominations for the floor, if somebody is going to be elected, Robert's rules state that you will have nominations from the floor. And so we've put in some other wording that you'll see when we get down to nominations from the floor of, you know, that if it's a subcommittee or if it's officers, they need to be able to provide input on themselves, basically, and why they think they deserve the position, et cetera. Jeff, we'll see when we get to Article 5, but I'm pretty darn sure it's in there about the annual meeting. So why don't we go into Article 5 right now, Tom, since we've got it up. Okay, so what we've done, I'm just going to go through, I've got the thing printed off with our differences here, and we can just, maybe that'll work out better rather than just
So I'll
going
stop
through the
sharing
bullet
then?
points. No, keep sharing. I'm just going to just verbalize an
Okay.
article in section 1. We've added a summary of the meeting types that wasn't in there before. And then we're wordsmithing a little bit down here, but basically that all
If we're gonna
meetings
have
shall
the
be
article
held.
up there, maybe Tom could put up Article 5 if that's what.
That's
It
what
is
he's
up.
got. That's where we are, Bill. Are you not seeing
Okay,
Article 5?
I'm just seeing 4, but I'm probably lagging. That's fine.
Okay, can everybody else see Article 5? Is
Yeah,
there
I
anyone who
can
can't?
see 5.
Okay. So this wording is key. All meetings shall be held and associated documents shall be made available in accordance with Oregon Public Meeting Law, these bylaws, and the policies and procedures. So that's why we didn't put anything in for board elect meetings specifically, because all meetings need to be held in associated documents made available in accordance with Oregon Public Meeting Law. The only exception is going to be task forces. So we'll get to that.
Nancy, there are 2 comments in the chat. First, Tom Prohodich has a minor point, and Barbara Triplett commented, I see that emergency meetings has survived in this version. What happened to time-sensitive meetings?
Okay, I don't think so, Barbara, but let's see what we get when we get to there. I think we're calling it urgent meetings.
On
Yeah,
the-
but we don't have that
bullet
here.
point. Yeah, bullet point.
Oh,
says
there.
urgency. Yeah.
Thank you.
It-
Okay,
that-
we
Sorry,
missed
that's
that
why I
one.
chimed in.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's
that
get
was
that changed to
that was-
urgent.
Yes, that was one of my few nits.
Okay, thank you.
That's my minor point.
Okay, can you change that one, Tom?
I can change it live.
Thank you. Gosh, good catch, both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're all agreed on that. It's just,
We have everywhere else we had urgent, so thank you, Barbara.
and we need
All
to do a
right.
scan. Okay,
Okay, good. All
okay.
right. So next slide. Okay, so this is still the introduction. So this
Yeah.
one requires that meetings be held either virtually or hybrid. If they're hybrid, they're required to have real-time discussion among members attending electronically and in person. No solely in-person meetings are allowed. And that's a change from current, when these were written before, we didn't have COVID, we didn't have Zoom meetings going on so much. So this is kind of reflecting reality today.
Let me know when you-
And that hybrid meetings shall provide real-time discussion among members attending electronically and in person.
as best we can.
Next, well, we're all electronic. And then general membership meetings, we've added that regular general membership meeting dates can be changed by the executive board with at least 14 days notice. And we've moved meeting times to policies and procedures. So the current bylaws don't have a way to change executive boarding, or excuse me, general meeting dates. It changes the election of officers to the April general meeting. And the second paragraph here, the June meeting shall be the annual meeting for the election of subcommittee members and approval of the budget for the following year. Election of officers shall be held at the April general meeting. So it's slides 36, Jeff. Removes the requirement, I guess next slide. It removes the requirement to post general meeting notices in 3 prominent physical locations. We do plan to have an annual physical posting in the PMP. And I believe there's still something under the communications subcommittee, or excuse me, task force about physical postings. And we're simplifying the meeting notice wording from what it was before. It still has some of the complications of hybrid or electronic meetings. And it clarifies a way in the next slide, clarifies a way for members to request that agenda items be added to the agenda. Okay, so
Comment in the chat from Jeff. My bad.
yes, Jeff. Oh, okay. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so I think any questions on this? Okay, so we'll go to section, so that's all
Is it-
for general
Yeah, so
meetings.
we did
Oh,
say
uh-huh.
urgent.
Yes, there we did. Everywhere else we did, but that was a good catch on Barbara and Tom's part. So now we're still in general meetings.
Nancy.
Urgent.
Tom has a
Cottage
question.
has a question.
Oh, okay. Yes, Tom? For Hodich? You're muted,
Um,
Tom.
Unmuting shouldn't be that hard, but it is. Sometimes it just doesn't
I
respond.
unmute and then I mute it back.
Ah,
If you go to general membership meetings, the first slide, 1 of 3, and this is, I mean, it's just something that occurred to me as I was reading it. It says that the June meeting shall be the annual meeting for the election of subcommittee members.
Correct. Because-
Should that maybe be standing subcommittee members? Because what happens if since Hillary brought it up, the STR committee was something that happened that was
That's a
determined.
good point. Yeah.
Determined that it should exist, but it was later in the year, is another time in the year.
Yeah, that's a good point. We probably should,
So otherwise
That's-
we're waiting, we might have to wait 11 months.
right. Can we put that in green, Tom? And but
I did.
thank you. Subcommittee members, I'm guessing we don't have any objection to something
think-
like that. That's a good catch.
Yeah, I've got to wordsmith that a bit, but I'll leave that in there. The
Okay.
order of the words is not quite right, but you don't want to watch me edit.
Thank you. Good catch. Okay, so anything else on general meetings? We'll go to special general membership meetings now. Article 2, section 2A. So basically as I can't remember if we've mentioned this already, but the current bylaws have special general meetings that are more for emergency situations. So we've split them out because there are special general membership meetings that cover one particular area, one or more particular areas that are noticed for those areas only. So like our special meeting that we're going to have on May 11th to adopt the bylaws is a special general membership meeting, but we can give regular notice for it. And then there's urgent general meetings, which are different. And so we've split them out. Notice shall be the same for special general membership meetings. And can you go to the next slide, Tom? So urgent membership meetings shall be called to discuss a time-sensitive or critical situation or issue as determined by the NCAC chairperson. And every effort should be made to provide as much notice as possible, but a minimum 24-hour notice should be issued through the NCAC email system. The link for the electronic meeting should be posted on the NCAC website and via email at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. So we don't envision this being used very much, but we have had a number of examples where it might be able to be used. Okay, any questions on that? And then we're going to get into meetings of the executive board next. Looks like we're okay. Okay, executive board meetings. So this is a little bit out of order because we haven't introduced Article 6, but I think all of you are familiar that we are adding an executive board in Article 6. And so they have meetings that really belong in Article 5. So basically it just describes how those meetings are going to be run, what the notice is for those meetings, and regular executive board meetings, special, next slide, special executive board meetings, and urgent executive board meetings. So we've heard your input on all of that, and that was all very, very helpful. We appreciate the officers giving input on that and others. So I think that's it. And then the next set of is subcommittee meetings. So basically standing and ad hoc subcommittees can meet when they want to, when they think it's necessary, either electronically or hybrid as described in section 1, and that meeting notices should be posted at least 7 days in advance of the meeting date on the NCAC website and distributed to the NCAC membership list. And next is quorums. So before we get to quorums, any questions at this point? All right, so
Nothing in the chat.
thank you, Susan. So quorums, we defined what a quorum is, and that they set because there has been some confusion over what quorum means. A quorum sets the minimum number of members present to discuss business and to vote. If you don't have a quorum, you don't have a meeting unless it's information only. We've increased the quorum for meeting to 15 from 8 for members to be present for all general membership meetings. And this is a recommendation from Robert's Rules of Order for an organization our size, that 15 is good. So it's almost double the current quorum. That may have been a real issue back when people were meeting in person, but since Zoom, when we've looked at the records, we should be able to reach 15. A majority of the members must be present to constitute a quorum for all executive board, as well as standing and ad hoc subcommittee meetings. So it's of those type of members. No quorum is required for meetings that are exclusively informational and for which no business is conducted. We added that in after feedback from you guys.
Not sure about that comma, but go ahead.
Okay. You get to deal with that later, Tom.
Okay.
Or now.
Sorry.
So any questions on quorums, discussion? Okay, moving on to, we were using the Robert's Rules of Order for all those recommendations on quorums. Standard. Motions. So members have the right to present, discuss, and vote on motions per the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. These bylaws and applicable Oregon law. We're going to be discussing whether we need to add in the yellow parts that were proposed. Action on new business items that are not on the agenda shall be referred to the executive board or subcommittee as appropriate. And the next one is conflicts of interest. So what we've done is we've added declaration of subcommittee members requirement at subcommittee meetings to the conflict of interest. Currently, it just talks about officers stating. Our committee's been stating conflict of interest declarations since we began, but we thought it should probably be in the bylaws. We also refer the definition of what conflict of interest is to Article 10 and also to the policies and procedures. They need to be fleshed out more about what constitutes it. It's actually, we've done some research on this and it's actually quite interesting. Commissioner Olson and Mark Everett both referred us to some sources. And while it's pretty clear definitions on the surface, when you drill down into them, there's whole trainings on this subject that kind of interesting. Enjoyed it. So we need to delineate a little more of that in the policies and procedures. Can we see the next slide? And basically any officer or subcommittee member who votes on or proposes a position on the issue is obligated to disclose the existence of conflict of interest. So we added in subcommittee member there, and then the rest of the definition is in Article 10. And this is another suggestion that we're going to be discussing later on about whether to change discussions to declarations or not.
There's a comment on the chat from Barbara.
Okay.
I suggest adding the addition number to your reference to RR00.
Yeah, the problem with that, Barbara, is that if an addition changes, you have to have a change in the bylaws. And so Robert's Rules actually says for any, whether it's Robert's Rules or any other parliamentary authority, you should say the current version of. And that way, as it changes in the policies and procedures, you could say what that current version is without having to change the bylaws themselves. So that's why.
And
that's why
I was uncomfortable with that. So
I know. And so that's part of our discussion coming up, but what we would do is in the bylaws, you say the current version of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. And then in the policies and procedures, we say edition, 12th edition.
Barbara
Until
followed
it's,
with another comment. Okay, thank you.
okay, thanks. Okay. Now are we on voting? Okay, so this is where we have increased we've made an exception to majority voting to increase the bylaws amendments to 2/3 vote, which we'll have under Article 9, amending the bylaws. We'll discuss that there. Otherwise, those attending via video conferencing shall register their vote via electronic polling or a roll call vote. Members attending a hybrid meeting in person may vote by a show of hands or paper ballot. A motion for a roll call vote may be made only before or immediately following the vote on an issue. A member must be present to vote. Proxy voting is prohibited. So this is where also we think we should put voting is on the honor system. And so this is where we need to discuss whether it goes in here or if it goes back in membership, Article 3 under member. So I think I'm going to ask Sarah if you have a feeling, Sarah, on where we should have this voting statement about it being on the honor system.
Hi, Nancy. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Okay, great. I think it can go here, or if there's another place where you all think it would be appropriate, that's fine too.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, our choice.
Maybe we're going to discuss this later, Nancy, but voting to me seems like the obvious place to put it.
Yeah. Okay.
Tom Perhatich has a comment in the chat, or
Okay.
or comment to speak to, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
the second paragraph, shouldn't it be immediately before or immediately following? I mean, before could,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we got.
Well, he's
Yeah.
talking about, oh,
you have
Yeah.
you have it before following, but not before.
Well, that is pretty restrictive. There may be a reason for setting up a meeting whereby roll call voting will occur. And that may be in planning for the meeting, so it's not going to be immediately before. Might be a special issue for which a roll call vote is appropriate.
And if the membership believes it's appropriate, then it'll be voted in.
That's correct.
Well,
So this stands.
Yeah,
well,
immediately.
you want to take, then you want to take out the first immediately. I understand your point, Michael.
Yeah.
was that
So-
your suggestion?
I
So
don't follow.
forgive me if I'm so was
Yeah.
there an immediately there before?
No, I suggested it thinking it was only something that could be done at the meeting itself.
Okay. And Tom just did it so quickly. I thought my eyes deceived me. Okay, great.
Copy and
so-
paste works real well.
Okay, so are we okay with this then? Any other discussion on that? All right. So while we're talking, Wyatt, I know you had a thought on where this honor system should be. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, once you determine membership, they're entitled to vote. So it seems to me that membership is what's going to be based, qualifications for membership are going to be based on the honor system, not necessarily voting, because once they're a member, they're automatically entitled.
So if someone can pretend to be a member, as long as they don't vote, it doesn't matter. So it only applies to voting.
I'm not sure that's correct, huh?
Okay,
What's wrong with it? Okay, we can discuss that later.
So I'm going to go ahead and defer it, but if anybody has thoughts about this in the feedback session, our attendees, please let us know or put your thoughts in the chat. And then we will, if there are no objections, we'll talk about it later on tonight. So Hillary, I think, has a comment.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I didn't know if you wanted on this specific thing, but I was just going to comment on voting. I'm kind of like a broken record, but I would love for a way to be considered for people to vote outside of the meetings. It's so hard sometimes to make it to that Saturday morning meeting for whatever reason, but somebody could participate in all these bylaws feedback meetings and all these things along the way and then not actually get to vote on it because we can't make it to the Saturday morning meeting. So I would just like to see that expanded so that there's a way for people to vote outside of meetings.
Yeah, I hear you, Hillary, and we've had this conversation, as you mentioned. The issue is that with not being present to vote is that it's not like it's a state of Oregon or even a Tillamook County vote where you have time in between, everybody gets documents well ahead of time, et cetera. It's usually that there's going to be discussion in a meeting that could change a vote. And so if you allow someone to vote ahead of a meeting, there could be discussion that could end up changing people who are there, that are at the meeting, their minds. And if you have votes coming in ahead of time, that person might have changed their mind if they had been able to be there to hear the discussion, but their vote could offset the outcome. And so that's why that and proxy voting just is not allowed, because the county says we can't have more than one vote per person. So
Nancy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the roll call voting issue also impacts that. You don't know at the time you cast a vote in advance whether a roll call vote will be called. And so you may not want to have your vote literally disclosed in a roll call vote. So it's kind of a catch-22, I understand, but I think that's also a realistic possibility.
I don't know of any situation where people can vote who were not intendant of the discussion and debate. The only possible thing I can think of is if the assembly decides to do a special poll, let's say, of the membership, irrespective of any meeting. Then they might be able to set up some kind of mail voting or something like that in order to get the response to a poll. But any policy or action or so on and so forth really needs to have the people sitting there with a quorum having been established and voting in person.
Yeah, I see there's some challenges with it. I would just rather, I guess, see us try to brainstorm how to work through those challenges instead of just writing it off and saying, well, if you're not there, you can't vote.
Well, it's not so much of writing it off. It's a matter of Robert's rules, making sure that procedure is accurate, that it is clear, and that it is followed. If we start sending votes out into the ether, we lose control. And there are all kinds of
increased participation, which is ultimately the goal.
Yes. Yes. And you can't participate if you're not there.
That's what I'm saying is the challenge. It's frustrating that I could participate, so much throughout this year, but if I can't make it to a Saturday morning meeting, I don't get to vote. And then I ultimately don't get to participate when it matters the most. And that's just I would just like to see more outreach. I'd like to see voting be easier for people who can't attend the Saturday morning meetings.
Well, I understand.
Can't you send your ballot in?
No.
No, cannot.
No.
Hillary, I understand your concern, and it's a valid concern. If we all have lives outside of this organization, and as much as we want to participate, sometimes we cannot. If there is an issue that is of great importance and substance that rises, it's perfectly reasonable to set up a special voting protocol for that specific issue. It would require some special planning and some special mechanisms for doing so. But like I said, unless it's something like a general polling activity, then if you're not there and you're not listening to the arguments and you're not listening to the changes and you're not listening to the motions to amend and so on and so forth, your vote really is not as accurate as otherwise it might seem.
I'd also like to say, Hillary, that I think what we're doing here, and I think the communication, the community plan task force, and hopefully some of these others, or I should say subcommittee, some of these others are doing is that we're offering these opportunities to provide comment, you know, that may not be part of the vote, but we're making a whole lot of changes to the bylaws based on these feedback sessions and people coming to the meetings. So in a way, the inputs, even though it may not be a vote, your input is being considered heavily. So
Yeah.
we haven't
And
taken this lightly about what you've said at all.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I guess when it comes down to like an election or something, or, you know, voting on a community plan or something, you know, it's just, I would like to see what I think, maybe Michael just mentioned something, you know, a special provision for being able to vote on something that is really of utter importance like that. You know, maybe
Yeah,
the voting is for a certain amount of time after the meeting so that people can watch the Zoom link and have all the latest information. But I don't, yeah, I wish there was a way to make it possible for more people to participate.
You can appoint a proxy, is that correct?
No,
No.
Oh,
no, you cannot.
Bill, no,
You can't have proxy voting?
Nope,
No.
it's right there.
Bill, right here. We've
Oh, that's bad.
talked about this.
I agree.
Yeah. So Bill.
Okay, so
So-
we haven't yet found a way of doing what you desire. If you have a specific mechanism, I mean, the problem is what you vote on, absent, may not be what gets voted on in the meeting. Because the
maybe
meeting,
that could be sometimes, I think, but sometimes if it's, you know, like, let's say it's the community plan draft, like, when they come to have us vote on that, I don't think it would be like, is that something that would be changed and redrafted? Like, wouldn't you then have to have another vote? So, you know, there might be discussion on it, but would the actual community plan change when a new one is brought forth to vote on?
So you actually
if-
bring up I'm just gonna move us on there because we're gonna actually deal with that here coming up, which is minority reports. And so
Okay,
you will
and-
have an opportunity at that point to for something that critical like that, you can submit a minority report if you don't agree with the outcome of the vote.
and
Well,
I'd like
yeah,
to say
that's
also that
That's like a consolation prize for not being able to vote on it. I think it
Not
would
at
be,
all. Well,
Well,
okay.
I-
if you like the process that we used for the bylaws, then you'll like what we're going to do with the community plan. We intend to go through it paragraph by paragraph.
So let's go to the next slide. And Hillary, I'm not meaning to cut you off at all.
oh, no, that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate it. I know it's like hard to get to move on.
But
Lots
yeah,
to do.
but there's
Thank you for
and it may be well, no, I appreciate your passion on this, and I know you're not alone. So I think Bill would join you. So anyway, but under voting, the secretary will make a permanent record, and votes in the executive board and subcommittee meetings shall be decided either by consensus or by majority of the members of that body. We just added as a result of feedback, I think from Jeff actually, that the consensus thing, which is pretty cool, actually. I like that. All other voting rules apply, and then keep going. So this, while it might seem like a consolation prize, actually is a pretty powerful option here of minority viewpoints being expressed. And that's in the current bylaws as well. But we've expanded on how this can be done in a maybe a little more ordered way. Anybody, and Sarah, if you'd like to weigh in on this, Sarah will tell us that or Commissioner Olson will tell us that the commissioners will take the input from minority reports just as seriously as they do a vote on an issue. And sometimes they will take the minority report and go with it instead of the majority report. So what this is doing is talking about how those reports can be submitted in a timely way with a group effort, and then people could still submit their individual things. But Sarah, if you wouldn't mind talking about minority reports, I would appreciate it.
Sure, Nancy, happy to do so. And of course, Commissioner Olson, if he has anything to say as well. Minority reports are very effective. The voting identifies the outcome of the process for consensus or, majority opinion. But the best work I think we all do as decision makers, myself included, those reports come to community development. When a decision is administrative, they go to the Planning Commission for hearings that are where the Planning Commission is the decision maker, and then they go to the Board of County Commissioners when the Board of County Commissioners is the decision maker. So essentially, any land use process that's reviewed by a decision maker, whether it's me, the Planning Commission, or the Board of County Commissioners, those minority reports help round out the opinions of the CAC. And there are sometimes things in minority reports that provide to be invaluable information, especially when it comes to considering how to address livability concerns, potential community impacts. We use those reports, both the majority and the minority report, when we're looking at conditions of approval. And so I think, my feeling is that every CAC should always submit a minority report, regardless of the issue, just because, or what's being discussed, because that minority report ultimately represents part of the community that maybe wasn't heard due to the outcome of a majority vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Commissioner Olson, did you have anything you'd like to
Yes,
add?
I would like to weigh in. From my perspective, a minority report, regardless of the subject and what's happening, whether it's what you're doing or something else, has some weight. And I personally like to hear what the minority has to say, because frequently they add something to the mix. But maybe more importantly, and just for my part in all of this, if the vote is 35 to 32, the minority is very close to being a majority in one form or another. And I think it may carry a little more weight than if it's 35 to 3. And that implies then, of course, that there are numbers attached to the votes, not necessarily names, but in other words, it's not this person or this amount versus this amount in total, and there's a winner and a loser. It's the actual numbers. So that's why I think a minority report is important. And, we operate America by the majority rule for the most part. But the minority is not to be ignored, and anyone who ignores it at his peril may suffer consequences. So to me, it's something that people in my position simply do, is we want to know what was said in the room, and maybe not page after page after page, but what did the people who did not vote in favor of something have to say and why? So that's my 2 cents for this evening anyway, so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom Prahodich has a comment, I believe. I think there's a difference between voting on policies and officers and a survey or poll that polls community opinions. For example, the surveys taken by the STR subcommittee were not votes, but surveys of community opinions on STRs. Okay, and Hillary, appreciate the reminder minority reports when it comes to elections, though they are not a solution. Yeah. If the NCAC wants to increase participation, then people need to be able to vote outside of a scheduled meeting. When it comes to elections, you get statements from the candidates that are right there in the meeting that might sway a vote. So I don't know. Would anyone like to comment on Hillary's comment? Okay, well, we'll take that up. I think something you said's kind of struck me there. I don't want to weaken on this because Robert's Rules is so strong about this issue, but about being able to watch a meeting and vote after seeing the meeting and the documents.
But that would
But-
mean that the votes at the meeting were not definitive,
That's
and
true.
that's bad,
Yeah, you wouldn't be coming away with a decision right on the spot. Yeah,
right?
that's true. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I've
Go
gotten
on.
stronger. Thank you. Yes. So communications. Basically, we just moved the periodic community surveys to policies and procedures. That's it. So on to executive board. So executive board is brand new because we have it didn't exist before, and we are really appreciative of the officers. They've been trying this since January. We've had 3 meetings so far. The executive board will consist of the elected and appointed NCAC officers and the chairpersons of subcommittees, all of whom shall be members of the NCAC, and possibly members of the task forces. We're not sure, probably not. And then the Sarah Absher shall serve in an advisory capacity. We're going to have "the" in front of your name in the future, Sarah.
So
Okay.
we could go ahead and add Sarah's name to this.
Yeah, you're not allowed to move to
Okay.
another
A
position.
couple of comments that have come in on the chat that pertain to the last article.
Okay,
One is Jeff says there might be decisions that we should make by a different means, no real-time votes. And then Tom Perhodich, my memory is that I suggested 3 business days when the time allotted for a minority report was shorter. I'm thinking it should be longer, maybe 5 business days, given that it requires a written document and we're volunteers.
okay, can we go back to that section? There it is. So what do you guys think? I think before, I guess there wasn't a time limit before.
Yeah, Nancy, this is Tom.
Uh-huh.
The majority is going to have expressed their position at the meeting, both by statements that have been made and by a vote. But if you're going to do a minority report, it's a report. It's got to be a writing.
Mhm.
And 3 business days really is to me, and I think I was the one that suggested 3
You
business
were.
days.
I think we had 48 hours and you
Yeah.
suggested 3 days, yeah.
But yeah, I think I would make it 5. I mean, that something that is more reasonable. Someone has to be designated, or a number of people are designated. I guess anybody can write a minority report, but because we're volunteers and we have other things to do, and because it's a writing.
Sure. And you have to kind of coordinate among the
Yeah.
minority voters. So question to Sarah, do you or Commissioner Olson, do you feel like that would be reasonable, that you don't normally need to have anything just right away, do you? I guess if you did, we could just say in that meeting that you need it sooner.
Yeah, I would say it depends on when a public comment period closes, or if it's a decision that's made at a public hearing. If it's a decision made at a public hearing, then typically you have until sometime during the hearing to present the comments. If it's an administrative review, there's going to be a public comment period deadline. 5 days should be adequate, but it may need to be sooner if the public comment period is closing relatively close to when the meeting took place.
So
didn't
maybe we
consider
say
that.
within 5 business days or within the public comment deadline. But we'll wrestle with that.
And I would say, does the minority report? Sorry, I'm just looking at this real quick. So the minority report would be written by a representative that it was part of the minority viewpoint.
Right, 1 or more representatives of minority positions.
And then would that come straight to me? I guess because I'm going to funnel most of the comments for any type of a decision anyway. So would those typically, so the CAC would not look at that again, it would just come straight to me?
Or
I think it could go to you directly, and then it says minority positions shall be included in the record and in any NCAC report. So
so
they could send it simultaneously, I would think.
I would say ideally it would come to me and the chair at the same time, or be submitted to the chair prior to the presentation of that opinion at a public hearing or meeting, if that's where the minority report was intended to be presented.
Okay, so
So we
Tom,
all get it, I guess is
yeah.
the point is.
So Tom, let's wordsmith that, make a note to wordsmith this to, we can look at this
I'm
point
not
of the,
exactly sure where we need to go on that. Now, the couple of issues was if there's a window that makes a minority report not useful after a certain time, that's going to be known at the time. And that's an artificial limit that is going to be known at the time. I think having it given to sent to the chair and you at the same time would be fine, because we're going to have decisions at meetings. We don't make decisions any other place.
There are two comments that have come in the chat relating to this. Wyatt suggested, why don't we make it 1 week so we don't have to define business days? And Barbara said, who will designate the writer of the minority report?
so I think we could put Barbara's question in P&P. And maybe we can actually do some of this other that Sarah was talking about in the P&P also.
Okay.
But
Do we want 5 business days or we want 1 week?
Tom
Just
1 week is.
commented in the chat, he's fine with Wyatt's suggestion.
so 1 week is okay.
Yeah,
And if I may,
because we don't identify with weekends. We're all,
and I
Yeah, we
would,
don't do weekends.
I'm thinking like a lawyer. Business day.
Sarah?
for clarification, those comment deadlines apply to everyone. So it would
Yeah.
apply to any report coming out of the CAC.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That's great. I think we need to actually have a section in the P&P on majority and minority reports probably then, because I don't think we address majority reports anywhere in the bylaws either. So
I would fashion it that way, Nancy. I was just thinking about that because I don't think I've seen any guidance or protocol for any type of a report. And I think probably the most important wording would be within a specific time not to exceed the the closure of the public comment period, or at or before closure of the public comment period.
Those are all
Okay.
kinds of things that I think should go in the P&P. Here's the general direction we're going. And we will need to get specific on how to format and how to organize reports.
right. But I think I hear you. Thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to go back to this part of the video, which is at 1:39. I'm making a note to get this wording down. So thank you.
There's this discussion on majority reports is, I think, done in the context of reports going to the county commissioners.
Correct.
Or some higher level organization. But I could certainly see issues that are sort of family business, if you will, that aren't going anywhere but within the organization, where differences occur. There are people who feel one way and people feel another way. And if we leave this writing the way it is right now, then anytime there is a difference in voting, we may be required to write a minority report, even if it's to ourselves. So I think we need to sort this out a little bit. This needs to be discussed further, rather than locking us into a protocol that really doesn't apply to everything that we do.
If somebody has a minority opinion, they need a voice.
Of course,
so that's
they do.
it.
Yeah. No,
okay, so let me finish.
Okay, all right.
This gives that voice. Now, if they choose not to do it, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think you could make it optional, but just also for clarification, you know, for
Okay.
going back to the CAC with the focus on land use decisions and citizen involvement, that's going to include, you know, should the CAC choose to provide comments, because, you know, to the point of, do we have to provide them all the time? There might be times when it's optional or the CAC doesn't feel like they need to, but you know, there are land use decisions. Most land use decisions are not made by the Board of County Commissioners. There are very few instances where they are. The majority of the land use decisions are made administratively and by the Planning Commission, which is largely what the CAC is going to be responding to.
No, that's good. Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
I think we can help clarify it if we note, or I think we need to talk about this, but any reports created is the precursor. Any reports created by the NCAC
So I think yeah.
also have a minority report along with it.
I wonder, Tom, if we should say any majority or minority review points shall be made part of the record by the secretary, because majority might not be in the form of a report. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm dissatisfied with the way it was. So
Okay. Yeah, we're probably fine.
But but in the interest of getting through this at least
Yeah.
once, let's move
Yeah,
on.
let's move on.
And I've
All right,
added a
so
note that we need to add the descriptions to PNP.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so on to executive board. So the composition, we've already gone through. Next page.
One more comment from Wyatt. A period of time, quote, not to exceed 1 week unless a period of comment is established by a requesting agency or entity is shorter.
Sounds good, Wyatt. Can you please email that to Tom? Unless Tom wants to copy and paste it.
Not in the interest of time, an email. I don't think anybody objects to that.
No.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have duties of the executive board. I'm not going to go through them all. These have been out there for quite a while. Other than down in D, we've got recommend to the membership creation of subcommittees and task forces as are deemed necessary to promote the purposes and to carry on the work of the NCAC. And I'm going to get back to that in a moment. And appointing task force members as appropriate. So while we're talking about having subcommittee members elected, which is going to be a discussion item, task force members would be appointed by the executive board. So there's a question about whether the membership needs to approve task forces that are new, or whether that's something the executive board can just approve. So we would appreciate feedback on that, because down in Article 7, under task forces, we have stated that they can be created by the executive board. So I'd really appreciate hearing members' feelings on whether the task forces should be, and certainly Mark, your input as well on whether task forces, if they're new. So standing ones, you know, we're going to be having the outreach task force, the communications task force, et cetera. But if there's something new, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to reverse myself. Let's wait till we have our Article 7 when we define what a task force is. So let's go on to Section 3. So the executive board shall take no actions that would conflict with the bylaws or action taken by the membership. The executive board may make recommendations to the membership for approval in general meetings. So that's basically it. It's to allow the officers and committee chairs to get together and discuss business in an open forum, subject to Oregon public meeting law, in between the bi-monthly general meetings. And it's particularly important with Oregon public meeting law that they can get together and discuss things in more detail. Any comments on Article 6? Okay, Article 7. It's a big one. So section 1, we have created,
Sorry, Nancy, Barbara has something that goes in the last article.
okay,
In the list of executive board members, you should include the immediate past president.
well, we certainly should, Barbara. Because they're really not elected or appointed, are they? Thank you. We'll add that in. Thank you. Okay, so on Article 7, while Tom's doing that, or actually, he's actually there. We're going to change committees to subcommittees because the NCAC is a committee, and so it was just a little awkward. So we're all now subcommittees, or will be. They're all subject to Oregon Public Meeting Law. A task force, so a subcommittee makes recommendations on policies, and they're subject to Oregon Public Meeting Law. The task force is charged with implementing assigned action. A task force does not address policy issues and is not subject to Oregon Public Meeting Law. The task force may have a chair. That's something we were just talking about today, but doesn't need to. Both subcommittee and task force chairpersons shall be members of the executive board. We're not sure if that should be shall or should, because we're not sure that all task forces are going to have chairpersons. So, but that's the main difference between the two. And this came up in one of our feedback sessions on Article 7, actually, and where it really came together that a task force is a perfect way of handling the communications responsibilities that were under a communications controller, a coordinator before, and also handling the nominating committee situation, as well as having outreach. So can you go to slide 2? Next slide. So we're recommending that subcommittees shall make recommendations to the general membership, either by consensus or by a majority vote of the subcommittee membership. Subcommittees shall record and provide minutes of subcommittee meetings to the secretary. So the only thing different there is that we're adding in the consensus option. And that last one is just kind of a mistake paragraph. So we have it covered later.
Okay. So that was redundant? Okay,
Yeah.
because I didn't notice that before. Okay.
I believe
redundant.
it is. We will make sure here, but yes. Yeah, it's down there in green. I moved it.
Okay.
So the executive board shall communicate. So it's a little bit difference in selection, and this has been something that's Hillary was talking about, and Jeff was suggesting a different way to do it. The executive board shall communicate a request to the membership for volunteers for subcommittees. Subcommittee members should reflect a cross-section of the community. Volunteers should indicate a willingness to serve by submitting a notice of interest as described in the subcommittee position application. The notice of interest may include a brief biography, including interests and viewpoints and any relevant qualifications. Subcommittee members shall be elected by the membership, while task force members may be appointed by the executive board. So that's a question. Let's go on to the next one to finish it up. And the executive board shall, the subcommittee members or task force members may be, okay. So that's kind of some different kinds of things. A subcommittee or task force members may be removed from their position by any reason. The NCAC shall have a standing bylaws subcommittee, which is not a change. A standing outreach task force should be responsible for promoting membership and coordinating the recruitment of officers and subcommittee or task force members. A standing communications task force should be responsible for assisting the NCAC secretary. So basically, it's establishing these 3 standing either subcommittee or task forces. The one is in yellow because there was a question raised this afternoon about whether task force members should be, the outreach task force should be responsible for coordinating the recruitment of task force members, but we can discuss that. We felt like, yes, they can at least recruit. They're not going to be elected, but they can at least recruit for them. So if you go back, because then we're going to get into the different task forces and subcommittees, we would really like input on whether you think that there should be a slate prepared by the executive board to present as a slate and voted on as a slate, or whether it should be like they did for the bylaws committee, having some interviews set up, but basically the membership as a whole votes on people to be on a subcommittee. So I'd like to read what Jeff wrote. He feels that having subcommittees formed by the NCAC should be voted on by the NCAA general membership is very much insufficient. Voted on how? We seem to be pretty firmly against the model where the executive board curates a balanced and representative committee in an open meeting with public comment, et cetera, and the membership ratifies the entire group in one vote. He thinks that model has a lot to recommend it. But he thinks we possibly can get the best of both worlds. So first of all, let's be clear that these rules are only pertinent in a very unusual circumstance when more people have volunteered than there are slots on a given committee, which of course happened to us this year. So how about this? The bylaws should explicitly grant the executive board the privilege of recommending a slate from the volunteers gathered by the outreach task force. The point here is that if there is ever a hot committee, that we try to avoid committee nominations turning into an electioneering knife fight. However, nominations are open to all, and the nominees vote is voted on via the method we discussed. Each nominee must get a majority of votes to be seated. If more nominees get majorities than there are seats, then those with the most yes votes win. Break ties with least no votes, and we would still get another level of tie breaking. Subcommittee members should reflect a cross-section of the community. He feels like that sentence serves no purpose if not directed at someone with agency. So basically,
can I summarize that?
that's
Because
his
I'm a bit
thoughts.
confused.
Yeah.
Is Jeff saying
Please.
that the executive board should vet the candidates and select a preferred set?
Yes. That is my
Okay.
understanding from other conversations that we've had
Okay.
and the
And
conversation
to me,
in
that
the
goes
executive
against
board meeting.
the openness we were trying to promote. Okay.
I agree with you, Tom. You know, nominations, it's totally reasonable for the executive board to develop a list of nominees. But nominations are always open until they are closed. That's straight out of Robert's rules. But to keep it in behind a star chamber kind of a selection process just makes it vulnerable to all kinds of power control there.
And I know that when there were some motions made last summer in June, to the effect of, you know, there's been a lot of distrust in the past. I don't think so much this year, but where people felt like they didn't have an opportunity to be on a committee. And that this clarifies that and allows, you know, anyone to be able to be nominated. Well, by having particularly committee members being elected, it gives people an opportunity to be nominated from the floor. It could be a compromise that a slate is suggested by the executive board, and then people can also self-nominate from the floor. That's also another possibility of a compromise, but usually the slate takes precedence. So, Mark, can I put you on the spot and see if you have any thoughts on this?
I think I'm probably an advocate for being as transparent as possible and not having, I mean, I think Michael spoke to it and Tom spoke to it. And so I would be more inclined to not want the executive board to present the slate, but to sort of vet them as nominees and have the membership vote on it that way, but not sort of select those behind closed doors.
Okay. So we can also, in the policies and procedures, put in a little bit more easily changeable wording that could talk about some of this as well. But does anyone else who's not a member of our committee or have any thoughts on this? And I know, Hillary, you like the idea of the slate also. Okay. So I think we'll talk about this again on our meeting on Friday, but we've talked about it a number of times, and this is kind of how we've come down on it. So I think at this point, why don't we leave it the way it is, and we can have another discussion on Friday. But Tom, in terms of doing the Word document, why don't you leave it the way it is?
Okay. If we'll start after this meeting, we'll start making changes to the Word document rather than making changes to the presentation here. So
Mhm.
you'll have something in whole cloth.
Yeah.
And you won't, but the disadvantage is you won't see what was. This is the opportunity that you have for seeing what was side by side.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll
Nancy.
have this change list too. Yes, Bill?
I just want to ask a question. I'm not sure who was speaking there about, but somebody said that I think it was the executive board would then vet the nominees. And I'm not sure what he meant by vetting the nominees. We had discussed that, and we didn't really see what vetting would be other than that they were a NCAC member. And if they were, then they were properly vetted. So I just to aid our discussion on Friday, I'm curious what vetting would be done by the person that was saying that.
That was Mark Everett, who is our chairperson, and I think, Mark, you were thinking of just interviewing like you did each of us on the bylaws committee, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess if I just go back to the process that we used starting after the elections in June, I called all of you and just had a brief conversation with you about your interest. We talked very casually, really, about your interest in Escalon, whether you live there, own property, or there, what your experiences had been. And so that's all it was. It was really that kind of a conversation. So maybe vet's too strong a word. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Something like interview would be.
Yeah, maybe that's a better word, Tom. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay with interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why don't we include that in the policies and procedures part of it? Susan?
In the chat, Hillary has a question.
Okay, Hillary?
Hey, I didn't want to kind of keep harping on this, but yeah, I just wanted to again say, I like that, you see more representation from different people among the community when there was a slate nominated before. I just am trying to get it to avoid it being like a popularity contest and having qualified people be shut out of the process. And then my question was, I guess, related to the vetting. If you can take nominations from the floor, how would that person be vetted if that's not done by the executive committee in advance?
Right. And so it's typical in Robert's rules that you allow nominations from the floor. And what we have in here is, and that'll be in the P&P also, but that when someone nominates themselves from the floor or somebody nominates somebody else, then they need to provide input on, what qualifications that person has for the job. So I think in the policies and procedures, which we're going to be tackling after the bylaws are approved, either this year or next year or combination, are going to have a lot more information about how these things are laid out in detail, and we should be able to have things in there about what information should be included and when it should be included, et cetera. So that hopefully, I know that it was helpful last year to actually see people speaking and that, you know, when they were going as opposed to just their submission, but.
Okay, I made a note that we're gonna have more details on the
Yeah.
qualification interview process. We probably won't call it that, but
Right, but just a note. Thank you.
Just a
Is that
note.
okay, Hillary? Is it okay if we move on
Oh,
now
yeah.
to?
Yeah,
But thank you
absolutely.
for your feedback, because I
Okay.
do understand the two areas. Okay, so moving on to,
where am I?
yeah, where am I? Oh, we're down in Article 7, Section 2, Bylaws Subcommittee, us.
Oh, we're right here.
No, we are. Oh, that's exactly it, Section 2.
Wow.
So, us. So basically, the main changes here are, it clarifies that the bylaw subcommittee can suggest bylaws amendments themselves. It requires the subcommittee to review the bylaws annually. It adds that the bylaws subcommittee members shall be elected at the June annual meeting. I think you have to go to the next page. Adds that the bylaws subcommittee is responsible for maintenance of the policies and procedures, a new document, and how our updates shall be recommended and approved for the policies and procedures. The definition is in Article 10, other bylaws provisions for the policies and procedures. The quorum was changed and moved to Article 5 member meetings, Section 5 that we already went over. So that's it for bylaws subcommittee. Moving on to Section 3, subcommittees and task forces, outreach task force. So this is new, replaces the nomination committee and adds responsibilities for membership outreach. The communications task force, we're excited about the outreach task force, by the way. We think it can do a lot of good stuff. Okay, next
The reason
slide.
for the highlight
Oh.
is there was a comment I didn't quite understand, so that's needs to have discussion. But we don't believe it'll change substantially what's there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next.
Yes. So communications task force, this was kind of there's a lot of detail in here over these 3 slides, and we may later have a bylaws amendment to change some of this to policies and procedures, but for now, we left a lot of it the same. We do have the executive board shall appoint 1 or more communications coordinators to the communications task force. The task force should report directly to the secretary. The purpose of the communications task force is to assist the secretary with the communications and information technology. Jeff wanted technology needs of the NCAC. I agree with that. The secretary has ultimate responsibility for the communications coordinator duties if the communications coordinator is unavailable or unable to serve. And that may be something where we change that to task force. But anyway, can we go on to the next slide?
Okay.
And so this just basically reorganizes and lists the same duties as before. There are a few little changes, but mainly it's just reorganizing what was under the communications coordinator role before.
I should note that there was a lot of redundancy in the original. We've eliminated that, and these numbers will turn into bullets, but they're just left so you can identify them if you have a
Right.
comment.
Thank you, Tom. And the next slide just does more of the same. Yep. So, and some of like updates for electronic meetings and things, but basically that's it. And at some point, some of this may go to policies and procedures, but for now, we just didn't have the wherewithal to do that. Okay, on to other subcommittees and task forces. So this establishes other standing or ad hoc subcommittees may be established as needed by the membership. So we've just added ad hoc and no change in the first paragraph. The purpose, composition, and operations of additional subcommittees shall be included in the policies and procedures. If those subcommittees complete their purpose, references to it may be deleted from the P&P. And we have task forces shall be constituted by the executive board as needs arise. So that's kind of what we had talked about earlier in officers, I believe it was. I don't remember which second we were talking about it, but we'd like input on whether you think the executive board should constitute task forces or whether they should recommend task forces and have them ratified by the general membership. Love to hear from you on this, Mark, but from anybody else as well. What should we do here?
If anybody doesn't like this, we need to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a comment in the chat from Wyatt, which reads organizational efficiency and practical necessity would seem to,
Mitigate,
mitigate in favor of having
militate.
forces be created without the necessity of a vote by the membership.
Yeah, that was one of my concerns, is that it's going to delay the form of a task force by as much as 6 weeks.
Right. So I mean, I think I agree with that. I could see where the executive board has sees a need for a task force to arise that that maybe the membership doesn't necessarily see, and that so I would be fine with the executive board creating the task force, but certainly laying out the justification for it to the membership as soon as possible.
Okay, so maybe have a ratification after the fact kind of a thing, adding
Or
in,
just yeah, or just, I mean, just even just an explanation of why, you know,
Yeah.
maybe that's all that is needed is, and you know, the duration of it, the time period that we think the task force is going to be needed, what happens when that duty is done. Those sorts of things, I think.
Mark, I think you're right on. I don't see any reason why task forces absolutely must be ratified by the membership. The membership may always object. If the executive presents to the membership a task force having been created and explains the purpose, the membership can move to eliminate that. I mean, that's always their prerogative.
Sounds like a plan. Does anyone have any other thoughts to this, or shall we just leave it like this and then we'll correct it in article? I think it was under executive. We'll find it. I think it was executive board. Okay. All right, moving on.
Okay, so that my note there is, we'll
Yeah.
figure out how to wordsmith that in.
That'd be great. Thanks. Okay, moving on to Article 9. We have nothing in Article 8. Oh, yes. Sarah,
Article
we
8.
need a word here. I think you
Yeah.
told us in our meeting on Friday, but
We forgot.
we forgot.
I think,
Tillamook County,
what?
Regulation.
Is it regulations? Is that correct? We seem to, we had a vague recollection that that wasn't the right word.
yeah,
If we
so
could
these
have
rules shall
confirmation of
apply
it.
in all cases unless they're inconsistent with Oregon Public Meeting Law, Tillamook County blank, or NCIC bylaws.
I would say ordinances.
Well, that's
Thank
it.
you. Thank
Mhm.
you. That's good. Thank you. We'll get it this time, right in the document.
No problem.
All right,
Oh,
thank
not
you.
ordains. I'm okay.
Ordained.
Well, check.
Article 9, amending the bylaws.
Okay,
We're
I'll
specifying,
correct that later.
yeah. We're specifying that the bylaws be reviewed annually and the timing of the referral to the bylaws subcommittee for study. We specified the timing. I didn't describe that very well, but we described how the bylaws subcommittee shall review and propose any amendments to ensure timely, inclusive, and transparent decision-making. And we changed the threshold to 2/3 majority from simple majority for adoption of bylaws amendments, which is standard with Robert's Rules of Order. They should be difficult. And that's it for Article 9. Any questions? Are you gonna? No. We got rid of the word registered that Jeff hates and changed to amendments because Robert's Rules really prefers amendments. Okay,
That's it.
Article 10. We are on the last article, people. Okay, so section 3, enabling of policies and procedures. We are changing the name of that. Suggesting changing the name of that. So this is just changing to policies and procedures. The NCAC may establish a policy and procedures document that lists the rules detailing the administration and implementation of the functions of the NCAC. The policies and procedures document may be amended with a simple majority vote of the NCAC membership. These rules do not supersede the bylaws of the NCAC and shall not conflict with these bylaws. Okay, section
So
4.
Nancy, on that section, in section 7, or I'm sorry, Article 7, Section 5,
Mm-hmm.
it has policies and procedures, and it says P and P.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the first time it's used? Is that?
You know, when we put it all together into a document, we will have P and P the first time, and we will have, I mean, after policies and procedures, and after that, we'll refer to it as P and P, Bill.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just for here, when it's in a presentation, we're spelling it out more than we usually would.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your editorial. We have a lot of really good editors on this committee and outside the committee. We'll have lots of opportunity to, when it's all in one Word document, I think that'll simplify things.
Okay.
Okay,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Tom.
We've made no changes since we had our meeting about the membership. I don't believe there are any changes to this that people haven't seen before.
Correct. So
We do have-
basically, Article 10 had definitions of terms. Section 4 defines many of the terms in alphabetical order. I think that's the only change.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Including business, business owner, conflict of interest, property owner, resident, roll call vote, and task force. And since roll call vote has had a lot of interest, why don't we go to that? So a roll call vote requires a motion and approval of the membership attending the meeting. If the motion for a roll call vote is approved by the majority, then each attendee shall declare their name and membership qualification, resident, property owner, or business owner, or combination, followed by their vote on the original issue. Each declaration shall be recorded and made a permanent part of the meeting record. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. And we define a task force, a limited number of members charged with performing specifically assigned duties and reporting to the executive board. The task force shall not address policy issues and is not subject to Oregon public meeting law. And then section 6 is the reference map.
5.
Yeah, I didn't think that was significant.
Okay, fair enough.
So I think you've all seen the map. And oh, do we have anything in the chat, Susan?
Yes, let's see, Barbara just made a comment. I'm uncertain about how task forces will do their work for the coming year if their purpose and operations are not defined until the P&P can be written and approved sometime in the future next year.
Yeah, Barbara, I think you raised a really good point, but it's more than we have currently. And there may be some things some low-hanging fruit like that we try to tackle this year. But you know, that is kind of an issue we've got right now when we don't have policies and procedures at all for the NCAC. So we will be looking at improving that.
We have a hot list of things that we know we need to do fairly soon, and we'll do as many as we can as soon as we can.
Yeah.
Barbara commented, just wondering.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara.
Incidentally, policies and procedures may be changed, amended, approved at any time.
Right.
That the membership meets.
Right. And I'm sure it'll be iterative. We may just have to have a standing thing on the agenda for policies and procedures going forward in all the general meetings. So, yeah. Okay. So that's,
Nancy,
yes.
On the Article 10 definitions, are Are some definitions in the body and some here? Is there a cross-reference? I didn't see that, unless
Yeah.
defined. Where
Okay,
it
let me
goes-
explain what's the proposed path forward is to take everything which is shown here as part of the part of the proposed document, everything which is labeled proposed. I think that's a proposed wording should be, and put that into a Word document and do a compare against the current, which will be R3 of the document. I guess I have to explain R3 of the current draft is we did.
The current draft Word document.
Yeah, it's a current draft Word document. The second version, R2, turned out to be obsoleted by more changes we made. So I stopped trying to track changes approved by the committee in the current draft. The original thought was that would be evolved. That turned out not to be feasible. So R1 text is poured into R3 with no changes. And actually I can, that's what's no changes other than this.
So Tom, I think it's getting late, but
So
this
anyway,
the-
so once, I'm sorry, let me finish my
Mhm.
statement, which is once that compare is done, then we will editorially smooth the whole document because we won't really understand how it needs to be smoothed till we get it as a document. So the stepwise is compare this with the original and then evolve this into a smooth document.
So regarding the definitions, you're still though envisioning the definitions in being in Article 10, correct? And
Yes,
then-
and if we need to make sure that there aren't any conflicts, that the roll
Mhm.
call vote is really described the same in both, or
Right.
there's a reference, and that's one of the
Right.
smoothing things.
Right. And so we've tried to do that even in the presentation where there's a reference to this, we'll say that it's itemized in Article 10. So I think we've been pretty good at that.
I'm not sure we did it for roll call, but we'll make sure it
I
happens.
think we did, but anyway,
Okay.
I could be wrong. So it's been intense. So anyway, I think that's it. Could you stop sharing, Tom, and we'll have
I
a
can
general
stop
discussion.
sharing right now.
Thank you. So are there any comments on the document as a whole? Do you feel like in general you've been heard? I realize we haven't done everything that everybody wants, but I think we've certainly tried to get your input and consider it. But we really value all the input we've gotten. I think we've got a much better document because of what you've given us, but would appreciate any general comments going forward before we go into our bylaws meeting on Friday. Barbara?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on the last slide that you showed with the map. The last conversation that I recall from one of these feedback sessions was we were going to ask Sarah whether or not the county GIS person could refine that map a little bit more. And I'm wondering if she's been asked that question, and if so, what the answer was.
Sarah, do you have a comment on that?
Thank you, Barbara. That's a great question. I have not talked to the GIS contractor about that work yet. I've been focused on other projects, but it's certainly something that I can ask about. And I appreciate you bringing it up. It's a good question.
Yeah, I think it really needs some refining before we send it out to the public. And I think there are other versions that are closer to the final version, but certainly the ultimate goal would be to have the actual information that is supplied by the federal government superimposed upon the Tillamook County map. And Bill has had a conversation with one of the people in the county government that handles GIS issues, and she was quite confident that the two could be merged. It's just a question of who can do it and how quickly can they do it.
If we're going to approve some document within the next couple of weeks, it's not feasible to change this.
Yeah, I
And
would.
I'd be interested in knowing what refinements need to be done.
Mhm.
The orange outline is more crudely drawn than was evident on the federal government map, is my
No, that
understanding.
is from the federal government map. That is directly from I took the federal government map and that outline and deleted everything behind it and superimposed it on the county map. So it is accurate.
Well, we're going to disagree with that. Unfortunately, Bill is working on a project right now that he can't speak to this issue right now.
Actually, I can speak.
All right.
And it's just a matter of taking one map, putting it on another map. And when you put the orange line on the map that you have it on, you possibly could have made it slightly closer to what the original map was. But that's just what happens when you move things back and forth. So it's nothing critical. The orange line itself is a pretty good representation of the shape.
I can promise you will have people questioning why we have an area of the mouth of the Nestucca River outlined as part of the boundary for the MCAC.
But that's because the county maps are not as accurate, I guess. I don't know.
So if I may, so a couple of things. So you probably talked to Wendy, who is the GIS cartographer, whose work focuses on tax and assessment work in the assessor's office. The GIS contractor that we have started working with, that contract is new. There are several projects in the pipeline for this contractor to work on. What I would say is that, there's two forms of representation. There's the map and there's the description. And typically the description can control. I think the map that Tom has created with the accompanying description is adequate at this time. And then as we move through projects that are very time sensitive with the GIS contractor, we can go back and revisit this. But I have to say, I do agree with Tom. I think it is a close representation, and it, for purposes of the membership and the advisory body, I think it's sufficient. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
What could be more controversial is the orange is actually the RGB code for Beaver Orange. So.
That is an excellent point, Bill. Thank you.
I needed a contrasting color.
Yeah, I see your yellow there, Bill.
Bill, it needs to be green.
Green, wow.
No. I'm sorry, as a beaver, I'm going to disagree with you there, but
how about heliotrope? Is that a good color?
We might have to go with purple. I think purple is
No, I want heliotrope.
I think the ducks are out now.
I see a comment from Roger. Roger, you've been unusually quiet, so please go ahead.
Well, you know exactly what I'm going to say.
Yes. And please feel free.
I listened to all this detail and all your hard work, and I still cannot comprehend how you can allow people to vote on other people's issues if they do not apply to them personally. I don't care how big the boundary is, as long as it's the official boundary and the recommendations from everyone who votes on an issue applies to them too. In the current situation, you couldn't have a more perfect example of the old cliche of rules for thee and not for me. I think that if this continues, it's going to greatly diminish the credibility of the NCAC and the whole CAC process. And I'm quite disappointed, actually, that the commissioners or the county council would accept such a situation. As I say, if you're going to vote on something for your neighbors, it better apply to you as well. And that's basically all I have to say on that issue. As far as the voting issue too, the controversy about whether or not you have to be at the meeting, our state has mail-in ballots, they have absentee ballots. And if it's good enough for the state, it might be good enough for the NCAC too. Thanks, that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Roger, and we have appreciated your taking part in our meetings all this time, and we do hear you. Thank
Okay.
you.
So part of the thing is that people can vote on things like zoning that are not necessarily contiguous. Any person can vote on any, or can make their opinions known on any zoning change. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. The other thing is, that's sufficient.
Well, let me,
We've discussed this quite a bit.
yeah, we have.
Previous.
Yeah, let me back you up there, Tom. It is hard for any of us to define what applies to me as differentiated from what applies to you. And how we relate to whatever issue happens to be there and the extent to which it does apply to me. If we have to go through each issue and determine who it applies to, let them vote, and then let's find this other one, and who does that apply to, then let them vote. We're out to lunch. It isn't going to work that way.
Yeah, and we're advisory. We don't make rules.
That's right. Yes,
We
we're
don't
advisory.
make rules. We
Yeah.
just offer advice. And if you disagree, then absolutely we encourage you
That's
to,
right. Yeah.
and if you disagree with this set of bylaws,
Mhm.
that's a great opportunity for you to
Absolutely.
create a paper which says, I disagree with this, this, and this,
Mhm.
and the county will see that.
Mhm. Mhm.
The other option is to come to our meeting on May 11th and propose amendments. You have that right.
That's an
also,
additional
and-
option,
and-
yes.
And we'll help you with that. Michael will give a training at 9:40 on May 11th, and both he and I can help with any amendment proposals. We want to make sure people are heard, and then the majority votes and rolls. So,
Yeah.
so we do
Just-
appreciate your input. Both you and I see Hillary also agreed on the boundaries.
Yeah,
So
thank
you.
One thing we didn't make clear is that we said minority report, parent S, so there may be more than one. So that, I believe, Michael will mention that the proposals need to be in writing. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes, although if something happens on the floor, we have to entertain it. But there is a strong desire to have any recommendations or amendments being proposed to do so before the fact.
Okay, so
In fact,
just
what
heads up,
we-
it would be really advantageous if you wrote it down exactly what you'd like or don't
Precisely.
like.
Yeah.
And so what that came out in the email that Jeff suggested, and I thought was a really good idea, was to have a deadline for written amendments or comments to come in by April. Well, I guess actually it's before we send it to county. So by April 17th. So we present to the membership what the bylaws are saying on April 13th at the general meeting. If we could get written comments from anyone who would like to make them by April 17th, we will consider those in our meeting, our bylaws committee meeting on April 19th. And then we're sending the bylaws, the draft bylaws, to the county at that point. And then the county will be coming back to us in time for our May. I don't have my list in front of me here. May 3rd bylaws subcommittee meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we'll get everything done there to have a final draft sent out for the Saturday, May 11th meeting a week ahead of time. So people will have a week. So back to the question, any other comments, any other feedback for us? You'll have further opportunities. Obviously, Friday morning, there'll be public comment. We're not planning any other feedback sessions, but you never know. I told Jeff, don't say final feedback session. But I know
Okay,
this has been a long night. I appreciate you guys hanging in here, but any other things?
I'd like to have a directive or at least agreement on that for the committee. Due to personal limitations, I'm gonna have to have a Word draft in the next 48 hours. So I will take whatever we have now and convert it and make notes of where there is controversy on the smooth copy. And then we can, at the regular bylaws committee meeting, we can discuss those. Because there's not enough time or energy at this point to do what we intended.
Right. So there are individual comments from Susan, from Wyatt, from Bill. So Tom, if
And
you
me.
would like to, and you, and me. So, so if any of you would like to talk individually with Tom, maybe some of you can resolve some of those issues between you before in the next, like tomorrow. And
Like,
so
yeah,
before he
like
converts, yeah, like maybe before tomorrow noon. I think that would be helpful. And then any remaining ones we'll talk about as a committee as a whole on Friday. Does that sound fair?
Yes, but so something substantive like the proxy voting, that would be deferred to Friday, right?
Proxy voting, Bill, I thought was set. That's
That
a
was-
Robert's Rules rule. So we
Okay,
can certainly talk
I-
about that on Friday, but that we had voted on as a committee to approve. But we can certainly discuss it Friday as well.
Okay, so I'll defer that. I have perhaps additional thoughts. But so small things like this definition, we should try to get to Tom right away.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, thank you all for hanging in there till 9:30. My goodness, and thank you all for your participation all the way through. Sarah, Mark, or Commissioner Olson, do you have anything you would like to say at the end after hanging in?
No,
All
you
right.
people are doing good work. I don't know how you sustain your energy and get all this done. It's really quite a miracle to behold.
Well, thank you. We're having a lot of fun with this. Ha 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 ha. Sorry. Mark?
No, I don't really have any comments. I do appreciate the work that you're doing. And the fact that you've been so good about seeking others' opinions and listening to those and considering those. And so I just appreciate the group and the work that you've done. So thanks.
Okay, well, thank you. I want to just give another shout out to the committee because it's been an amazing experience working with this group and for all the input from everybody. I think we have a couple of things in the chat, Susan, with Barbara.
Yeah, Barbara says another marathon, but we can see the finish line. Great work, team. And Hillary says, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to adjourn the meeting and stop the recording. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah.
See you
Thank you. If
Friday.
I can
See all of
find
you.
out.
Good
There
night.
it is.
So,
Just have to figure out how to stop the recording. There it is.